Hello and welcome to the She Reads Romance Books podcast, the ultimate show for romance book lovers looking for the best books worth reading. I'm your host, Leslie Murphy, and in each short episode, I share my favorite book list of recommendations so you know exactly what to add to your must-read list. Join me as I explore the romance genre and have fun collecting book boyfriends along the way, because life is better with a love story. Hello, readers. It is time to queue up your to-be-read list because in today's episode, I am sharing my top 10 most anticipated new romance book releases dropping this April 2025 that you don't want to miss. You know that it is my mission here at She Reads Romance Book to help my fellow romance book lovers find the best books worth reading, because there's only so much time and money in the world. So every month I share my most anticipated new releases to save you time from weeding through all of the releases of the month, so you know exactly what you should be keeping your eye out for in reading this April. Okay, this month appears to be the month for new releases from some of the biggest names in romance, and you are not going to want to miss them. Don't forget, though, that you can find even more books to add to your reading list on my upcoming releases page over at shereadsromancebooks.com for more not only in April, but more to come throughout 2025. And you can always refer back to my previous monthly release book post on shereadsromancebooks.com or in the podcast episodes where I share my top 10 new releases for each month. If you're following along with me and participating in the She Reads Romance Books Romance Book Reading Challenge for this year, for March, we are reading one romantic comedy. So if you love rom-coms, this is the month to read one in this category. If you're stuck on a pick, the March book of the month for the She Reads Romance Books book club would make the perfect pick. This month, we are reading Dreamgirl Drama by Tessa Bailey, and it's so good. And I cannot wait to talk about it in our book club meeting on Zoom, and again with Tessa in our author Q&A. So if you would like to join us in one or both of those, just go to visit shereadsromance.com/book club to learn more. Lastly, if you subscribe to my newsletter, then you'll also get my weekly romance reading challenge prompts. For these challenges, I pull a card from my A Year of Reading Romance card deck, which is a deck of 52 cards, each with a reading challenge prompt and a romance category or trope to explore. I absolutely love this deck, and it's perfect for you to create your own challenge if you'd like, and you can purchase your own copy to have if you just visit, again, shereadsromancebooks.com, click on shop, and you can grab a card deck for yourself. Okay, so now on to my list of top 10 most anticipated new romance books releasing in April 2025, starting with If Tomorrow Never Comes by Allison Ashley, which releases on April 1st, and here is what it's about. Uncertain of what tomorrow brings, Elliot Holland decides to live it up on the eve of a stem cell transplant to treat her leukemia. It's destiny when she crosses paths with handsome and charming Jamie Sullivan. The chemistry is magic. So is a beautiful evening that ends with a bittersweet kiss goodbye and no expectations of ever seeing each other again. 1 year later, Elliot's future looks good. Her cancer is in remission, her career in graphic design is taking off, and she's finally met Carly, the young woman whose stem cell donation gave Elliot a second chance at life. Then, in a twist of fate, both blissful and unfair, she meets Carly's boyfriend. It's Jamie, the man Elliot kissed like it was her last day on Earth. Neither of them has ever forgotten it. Now, the most difficult decisions of all lie ahead. Whatever risks there are to the heart, one need wins out: to grab hold of everything that can make someone feel alive again. So, in full disclosure, I was lucky to get an advanced reader copy of this romance, which I read actually at the end of 2024. And trust me when I say that it's already earned a spot on my best romance books of 2025 list because it's that good. This was my first book by Allison, and it won't be my last because I love her writing and I love how she brings in part of her real life work into this novel and others, I believe. She works in oncology. So, and I mean, just saying that word, right? I mean, you expect that your heart is going to go through the ringer with this one about fated soulmates that kind of get stuck in a love triangle. But I wouldn't get hung up on the love triangle piece because I know some people don't like those, but this one isn't really your typical love triangle when I describe it as such, and you absolutely should read it. I loved the strong heroine and adored the hero. Their meet cute was really perfection because you have to sell them all on that first date that they had because then you're totally rooting for their happily ever after. Despite the complicated and crazy situation they eventually find themselves in. So I loved it, and I think you will too. Definitely put this one on your TBR list. Next up on my list, and I'm sure a lot of others have it on their list too, is Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. Her latest, which will drop on April 1st, and here is what it is about. There might be no such a thing as a perfect guy, but Xavier Rush comes disastrously close. A gorgeous veterinarian giving Greek god vibes, all while cuddling a tiny kitten? Immediately, yes. That is until Xavier opens his mouth and proves that even sculpted gods can say the absolute wrong thing, like really wrong. Of course, there's nothing Samantha loves more than proving an asshole wrong, unless, of course, he can admit he made a mistake. But after one incredible and seemingly endless date, possibly the best in living history, Samantha is forced to admit the truth that her family is in crisis and any kind of relationship would be impossible. Samantha begs Xavier to forget her, to remember their night together as a perfect moment, as crushing as that may be. Only no amount of distance or time is nearly enough to forget that something between them, and the only thing better than one single perfect memory is to make a life and even a love worth remembering. So if you listen to my last episode on my February reads, you'll know that I've already read this and I absolutely loved it and I highly recommend it. Like all of her books, you just, as I said in the last episode, you want to keep a box of tissues nearby because it really hits home in so many ways. I just loved their first date, but due to circumstances, which I won't necessarily get into to spoil it, they can't really have a relationship or start a relationship, and that just sucks because they know how rare their connection is. So they're dealing with that, but then there's this family in crisis that Samantha is wrestling with, and I just think it's a fantastic book. Put it on your TBR list for this April. It is definitely worth it. Next on my list is an author that I have not read in a very long time, who is Beth O'Leary, and her new romance book is also coming out on April 1st, and it's called Swept Away, which I'm hearing is a reverse age gap romance, but here is what it's about. What if you were lost at sea with your one-night stand? Zeke and Lexi thought it would be just a night of fun. They had no intentions of seeing each other again. Zeke is only in town for the weekend to buy back his late father's houseboat. Lexi has no time for dating when she needs to help take care of her best friend's daughter. Going back home with a stranger seems like a perfect escape from their problems. But a miscommunication in the dark, foggy night means no one tied the houseboat to the dock. The next morning, Zeke and Lexi realize all they can see is miles and miles of water. With just a few provisions on the idle boat, Zeke and Lexi must figure out how to get back home. But aside from their survival, they're facing another challenge because when you're stuck together for days on end, it gives you a lot of time to get to know someone and to fall in love with them. So I have to say that I'm so intrigued by this storyline, right? You're adrift on a houseboat with your one-night stand. I mean, I guess they don't have cell reception that far off the coast, and maybe nobody's looking for them. If I put those two things aside, then I think I can get really excited to see how the angst of their predicament and the forced proximity of these strangers, but for their, one-night stand, will sort of make them cope and get to know one another. O'Leary's debut novel, The Flat Share, is one of my all-time favorite romance books. So any book she's written after has such a high bar to meet, to be honest. I didn't like one of her previous releases, so I've sort of backed off of her last book or two. But I think this is the book to make me return to her work, and I'm really excited to see what it brings. Okay, next I'm moving from an author I haven't read in a while to a debut author. And honestly, nowadays it takes a lot for me to read a debut author before I've learned sort of more about their work, but I'm excited for Any Trope But You by Victoria Levine, which also releases on April 1st. Which, man, I don't know what it is about all these authors wanting to release their books on April Fool's Day, but there are a lot coming on April 1st, let me tell you. But anyway, here is what this new release is about. Beloved romance author Margot Bradley has a dark secret. She doesn't believe in happily ever afters. Not for herself, not for her readers, and not even for her characters, for whom she secretly writes alternate endings that swap weddings and babies for divorce papers and the occasional slashed tire. When her happily never after document is hacked and released to the public, she finds herself canceled by her readers and dropped by her publisher. Desperate to find a way to continue supporting her chronically ill sister, Savannah, Margot decides to trade meet-cutes for murder, the fictional kind, probably. But when Savannah books Margot a 6-week stay in a remote Alaskan resort to pen her first murder mystery, Margot finds herself running from a moose and leaping into the arms of the handsome proprietor, making her fear she's just landed in a romance novel instead. The last thing Dr. Forrest Wakefield ever expected was to leave his dream job as a cancer researcher to become a glorified bellhop. What he's really doing at his family's resort is caring for his stubborn, ailing father, and his puzzle-loving mind is slowly freezing over until Margot shows up. But Forrest doesn't have any room in his life for another person he could lose, especially one with a checkout date. As long, snowy nights and one unlikely trope after another draw Margot and Forrest together, they'll each have to learn to overcome their fears and set aside their assumptions before Margot leaves, or risk becoming a happily never after story themselves. I mean, doesn't that just sound fantastic? I love that it's set in Alaska for some reason, which sort of ups the ante when it comes to their forced proximity. Both main characters are caretakers, so I have a feeling that that will be a running theme throughout the book to reflect on and sort of digest. But I adore that this is a romance author who's sort of fallen out of love, gets found out, and then tries to abort, but ends up in her own, happily ever after in the process. Super cute, so I have high hopes for this book this April. Next on my list is another author I haven't read in quite some time, and it's high time that I remedy that and get back to her work, and that is Susan Enoch, which I never feel like I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I'm sorry, Suzanne. With her latest historical romance, A Duke Never Tells, that is releasing on April 1st. And here is what this book is about. Before entering into a supremely advantageous arranged marriage with James Clay, the new Duke of Ernhurst, clever independent lady Meg Pinwell has to see if he's really the rake he's rumored to be. But how is a well-bred young lady going to make sure he's the man she wants? With the help of her aunt Clara, they plan some discreet reconnaissance at the Duke's country estate. Meg will pretend to be her aunt's maid/companion to see the true state of affairs at Ernhurst Manor. But Meg isn't the only one pretending to be someone she isn't. In order to escape Clara, who is surely a marriage hunter, James has traded places with the excellent Rynnikin, the former Duke's butler. Soon everyone is falling in love with the absolute wrong person. They say the course of true love never does run smooth. At Ernhurst, it's running amok. I'm just smiling, I think, reading this book summary because it sounds super cute and looks to be a book that is a lot of fun, given all the pretending that is going to be going around. I loved Suzanne's Wild Wicked Highlanders series, which had really great characters and great writing, so I'm really hoping that she brings that same level of excellence to this new book that I think is going to make April really fun when you check out this historical romance. All right, turning my sights now to an enemies to lovers fantasy romance. My next most anticipated new romantasy book, or I should say, which made my list of most anticipated new romantasy books of 2025, is going to drop on April 1st also, and it is Sweet Obsession by Katie Robert, which continues her Neon God series, and here is what it is about. Icarus may not have flown particularly close to the sun, but he has fallen right into the rough hands of Olympus's own Poseidon. Being held captive by the gentle giant wouldn't be so bad if Olympus wasn't on the eve of destruction, or if Poseidon stopped looking at him with those irresistibly stormy eyes. Poseidon doesn't have time to babysit his increasingly bratty prisoner, but he has no choice. Olympus is officially at war, and someone has to keep their best bargaining chip out of harm's way. The thing is, the longer Poseidon is with Icarus, the more he starts to care for his sworn enemy, and the more he realizes that Icarus isn't the villain he's been made out to be. There's a warmth to him, a vulnerability that Poseidon finds difficult to ignore or deny. Now, with Circe and the Aeaeans at the gate and Olympus a hair's breadth away from falling, Poseidon will have to make a difficult choice about himself, about his allegiances, and about the man who woke his heart from its long slumber only to threaten to break it for good. Okay, gosh, as I mentioned, this book continues Katie Roberts' Neon Gods series. It is book 8 out of 10 of this in the series. So far, there has been an ongoing storyline between the books of the series where the unrest in Olympus is about to sort of bubble over. So I'm not really sure if you can read this as a standalone or not. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I love that it's an enemies to lovers romance, and I believe that it's her first romance of the series. I mean, there have been MMF books in it, but not strictly and I think also in Sweet Obsession, one of the heroes is a plus-size hero, and I think there's probably going to be some explicit sex, so if it's like any of her previous books in the books. So all of that to fall in love with for this new April release. I like that this series and all the books in it are slightly fantasy, slightly dark, but also can be kind of read like a really cool contemporary romance if there was like this modern day Olympus with people who are gods and fighting for power. I think it's going to be a great one. And as I said, it made my list of most anticipated new romantasy books of 2025. So I think it should be on your TBR list this month. Okay, we are more than halfway through my list. And I know you're going to want to read those 6 I just mentioned, as well as the following, but with so many books releasing these days, it can be easy to forget my recommendations, which is why I always recommend my romance book reading journal, which has several to-be-read pages in it to record these recommendations, so you will have them all in one spot and won't forget them. Plus, it has so many other pages to help you plan, track, and record the books that you read and your thoughts all about them. Or if you don't want the romance book reading journal, you can also snag my free reading log bookmark that you can print out each month and write down all 10 of my recommendations from this list so you never forget what to read next. To get this bookmark, just go to shereadsromancebooks.com and click on freebies in the menu bar, and you will see where you can download that bookmark for free. Okay, my next most anticipated new romance book release for April is Firebird by Juliet Cross, which also made my list of most anticipated new romantasy books of 2025. If you're a fantasy romance fan, I had the best time talking with Juliet about this book for the podcast, so stay tuned for that episode to drop in early April to hear more about this book. But in the meantime, know that it releases on April 8th, and here is what it's about. A conqueror captivated, a witch prophesied to save them all, a world where dragons rule Rome. From the moment Roman general and nephew to the emperor, Julianus Dacia, laid eyes on Melina, he was enthralled by the Dacian dancer. Years later, the fierce beauty stands before him on a scarred battlefield, her life in danger. He instinctively shifts into his fierce dragon form to save her, an action that may mean his head on the imperial gate. But he and his dragon know one thing: she belongs to them. Melina can't believe that the centurion who had once bestowed a secret talisman on her is the Roman general of legendary brutality. His prowess as a warrior cannot be denied, yet they don't reveal the secret he hides. All Melina knows is his protection and gentle touch, and she cannot deny how her soul has always seemed to answer his. As they navigate a world where flying death riders conquer and burn, their love will ignite a firestorm that can only end in heartbreak or death, or both. Basically, all I and you needed to know about this book is that it has dragons, right? Because dragons are having their heyday right now thanks to the Fourth Wing series. But in this book, Juliet uses a backdrop of ancient Rome to create this new world where men and some women can shift into dragons, either in their half-skin form or full form. I think that you will love this if you love a possessive hero, a strong heroine whose destiny is still unknown, but who is going to change the world in more ways than one. Definitely check out Firebird and just honestly bask in its cover, which is just gorgeous. And stay tuned, as I said, for my interview with Juliet to learn more about this book because we had a really great chat coming soon. Okay, this next book made my list of most anticipated new romance books of 2025 because I'm just so completely excited about it and can't wait to read it. And that book is Wild and Wrangled by Lila Sage, set to release on April 15th. And here is what it is about. Camille Ashwood had always loved a plan. Her latest was her best yet. She was going to get married so that she could secure her daughter's future, get her overbearing parents off her back, and finally start building her own life in small-town Meadowlark, Wyoming. Easy, right? But when her groom doesn't show up to the wedding, Cam's life is turned upside down. She doesn't even have a place to live. That is, until she finds out the house she's loved since high school is available to rent. There's only one problem: the neighbor. Dusty Tucker has spent nearly all of his adult life running. Running from what, though? More like who? Cam Ashwood. But ever since he returned home last year, the girl who was his first, well, everything, has become a woman seemingly determined to keep him at arm's length. And he was okay with that. At least that's what he kept telling himself. She was getting married, after all, but now she's single and living next door. Dusty wants to show her that they can be friends and that he can stay put. Despite her best attempts to stay far away from Dusty Tucker, Cam realizes that being close to him is like slipping on her favorite jeans. Easy, comfortable. That is, until past wounds start to open and feelings both old and new wreak havoc. Nearly 10 years after they first met, Dusty and Cam begin to wonder if their first love can also be their last. And this time, will it be forever? I'm honestly already devastated that this new romance book will bring the Rebel Blue series by Lila Sage to an end, but I have a feeling it's going to rival Lost and Lassoed as my favorite. You already come to know these characters a bit from that book especially, so I'm just desperate for Dusty and Cam's happily ever after, knowing their history and his tattoo. I mean, gosh. I also have a thing for heroines who feel like they have to juggle it all, right? And who keep their true feelings close to the vest, which I think is totally Cam. And then I really need to find out why Dusty was going to let the love of his life marry somebody else. Like, what were you thinking, Dusty? But this is definitely a second chance romance that should not be missed this April. Okay, a new romance book release that is sure to be a hit this April is Emily Henry's new romance, Great Big Beautiful Life, that will drop on April 22nd. And here is what her book is about. Alice Scott is an eternal optimist, still dreaming of her big writing break. Hayden Anderson is a Pulitzer Prize-winning human thundercloud, and they're both on balmy Little Crescent Island for the same reason: to write the biography of a woman no one has seen in years, or at least to meet with the octogenarian who claims to be Margaret Ives, tragic heiress, former tabloid princess, and daughter of one of the most storied and scandalous families of the 20th century. When Margaret invites them both for a 1-month trial period, after which she'll choose the person who will tell her story, there are 3 things keeping Alice's head in the game. 1. Alice genuinely likes people, which means people usually like Alice, and she has a whole month to win the legendary woman over. 2. She's ready for this job and the chance to impress her perennially unimpressed family with a serious publication. 3, Hayden Anderson, who should have no reason to be concerned about losing this book, is glowering at her in a shaken to the core way that suggests he sees her as competition. But the problem is, Margaret is only giving each of them pieces of her story, pieces they can't swap to put together because of an ironclad NDA and an inconvenient yearning pulsing between them every time they're in the same room. And it's becoming abundantly clear that their story, just like the tale Margaret's spinning, could be a mystery, tragedy, or love ballad, depending on who's telling it. I honestly think the more apt question is who won't be reading Emily Henry's new romance book this year than who will be, because I have a feeling if her past releases are any indication that everyone is going to be picking up this sort of rivals to lovers romance. I am getting some Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo vibes about this story, and that it will, and I'm loving, I should say, that it will weave in Margaret's story as well as Allison Hayden's potential love story. I have my advanced reader copy all queued up and ready to go, and I'm really hoping that this one is going to be one of the best of the year. People We Meet on Vacation is still my top Emily Henry romance book, so we'll see if this one gives that a run for its money. The last new romance book release on my list for April is If You Stayed by Brittany Cherry, which sounds to be an amnesia romance. But here is what it's about to learn more before it drops on April 22nd. There once was a man who loved me until he forgot every memory we've ever shared. Gabriel Sinclair would forever be my first best friend, my first kiss, my first love, and my first heartbreak. The accident that nearly took his life ripped the memory of me from his grasp, and for the last decades, I've let the guilt of that one terrible night keep us apart. It took me years to make peace with the fact that he would no longer be in my life, so when he shows up as the architect for my new home, my world's tossed upside down. Now I'm trapped in a loveless marriage, raising a child while Gabriel stirs up feelings I thought long buried. It feels like my soul is waking up after years of being in a deep slumber, and my controlling husband will do whatever it takes to keep us apart. I know I should push Gabriel away to protect him from the shadows surrounding me, yet I can't deny the hope that blooms whenever he's near, the chance that he might remember me, that we could reclaim the chapters of our story that we've lost. Nothing good could come from us, but I can't help but wonder what would happen if this time he stayed. There once was a man who loved me, and now he's my only hope for tomorrow. Holy heck, that is a really great book summary that, again, has me clamoring for this book. But it sounds like it's going to be a total heartbreaker as well. Amnesia is actually a popular plot device, and I've had a book list for these types of books in my queue for a while. So I think I'm going to have to finally get to it and put this one on the list as well, if I love it, especially, which I'm sure that I will. But I know it's another one this month that to have a box of tissues nearby while reading it, I think, for sure. Okay, and so that book wraps up this episode of my top 10 most anticipated new romance books releasing in April that you do not want to miss. I hope I've given you quite a few books to consider reading this month. It's hard not to want them all right now, right? But at least April 1st is coming fast and is bringing quite a few to hold you over until the rest release later in the month. So that's a good thing. One last thing before you go, please don't forget to drop me a quick review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'd so love it if you did, to give me and the show some love. Just takes a minute, but it has a really, really big impact, and I would greatly appreciate it. So thank you so much. Until next time, happy reading, because life is better with a love story. That's all for this episode of the She Reads Romance Books podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and found some new books to add to your TBR list. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really helps me reach more romance book lovers like you, and I appreciate your support. If you're a book boyfriend collector like me, then you'll want to join my email list so you never miss a podcast episode or a new book list. Just visit shereadsromancebooks.com/join and sign up today. As a thank you, I'll instantly send you my list of top 10 book boyfriends that will make you swoon. Trust me, you don't want to miss this list. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy reading.